Welcome to the Deep Dive. Here we take often dense academic research and, well, we try to turn it into clear, practical insights for your classroom,
That's right.
especially if you're a teacher or school leader, right here in Bangladesh, looking to build, a more inclusive, more resilient learning environment. Think of this as your evidence shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
Today we're diving into some really crucial research. It asks a powerful question, simple on the surface. What's the true cost of assessment in Bangladeshi schools? Particularly when we look beyond just the marks, the scores on the paper.
Yeah, beyond the numbers.
Exactly. Our mission is to unpack the findings from a paper called Testing Times, the effective impact of tests in Bangladeshi schools. We want to turn this into knowledge you can actually use.
And it's based on some solid field work.
It really is. It draws on deep interviews, students, teachers, parents, even senior ministry officials, across different regions too, not just one area.
Which gives it weight.
It does. And the big takeaway, we've seriously underestimated the emotional impact, what the research calls the affective impact, of all this testing.
That's the core finding, really.
We're going to explore how this relentless focus on high-stakes exams, especially the secondary school certificate, the SSC, creates this almost crippling culture of anxiety, and how that anxiety often masks deeper systemic problems in education here.
It's fascinating, actually. If you look at it through, let's say, a critical data studies lens, how we use numbers, how power operates through data well, test results often get treated as neutral. Objective facts, right?
Yeah, just a grade.
Just a grade.
Yeah.
But this research powerfully demonstrates they are anything but neutral. They are, highly charged social tools. They don't just reflect the system. They actively create an emotional climate.
An effective atmosphere.
Precisely, that palpable, effective atmosphere in schools. Understanding that atmosphere, that pervasive feeling of pressure, that's really the key to grasping why teaching and learning can feel so challenging right now.
Okay, so let's unpack this atmosphere then. Because the research makes it clear, this pressure cooker starts early. It describes the whole system as a cascade of tests. It sounds exhausting just reading about it.
It really does.
You've got monthly tests, then half-yearly exams, yearly exams, and they're all framed as just steps towards the big one, the SSC at the end of year 10, the exam that basically decides your college path.
It looms large.
And when they talk about affect, they're digging deeper than just, feeling happy or sad about getting a B instead of an A.
Right. It's not just simple emotion.
No, it's described as this visceral thing, something you feel in your gut, a kind of collective condition that shapes how everyone interacts, students with teachers, kids with parents, even students with each other.
And that collective condition, overwhelmingly, is one of anxiety. The students interviewed, they get it, they know these tests are just part of the system normalized, supposedly for capacity building.
Right, that's the official line.
That's the line. But they admit it just generates this relentless pressure, this constant worry.
I found their main coping strategy really, heartbreakingly simple. When they were asked how they deal with all this anxiety, their main answer was basically to tell themselves, just read attentively.
Just focus harder.
Yeah. It's like admitting the only response they have within this high-pressure system is to push themselves even harder inside that same stressful box.
Yeah.
Because they know deep down those grades are the absolute key to getting into college.
It's the only path they see.
But let's pause on that. I mean, isn't a little pressure good? Doesn't it motivate? Why are the researchers specifically calling this an effective anxiety and not just, healthy academic drive?
That's a really important distinction, and it comes down to context. The research stresses that this intense testing system exists against a backdrop of really serious underinvestment in public education.
Okay.
We're talking about a huge system, over 38,000 government primary schools, but public spending on education was way down at around 1.3% of GDP back in 2019. That's very low.
Well, okay.
So when the public system is chronically under-resourced, what do the scores really reflect? Is it genuine learning quality? Or is it more like desperation, a desperate scramble to get ahead in a system perceived as maybe failing many?
Right.
And then add this. Only about 3% of institutions are government-run. The vast majority, 97%, are private or non-government. So these high-stakes tests become the single bottleneck, the filter everyone has to fight through to access the few high-quality, affordable public options later on. That's not healthy drive. The research suggests it's hyper-competition born out of systemic scarcity.
That context is crucial. And it sets us up perfectly for the next point, how these test results stop being just scores and actually become a kind of cultural currency.
Absolutely. It's all about hitting one target, the perfect GPA. That means a GPA of 5, which is 80% or higher. But, even that sometimes isn't the real goal.
There's another level.
There is. The ultimate prize for many is the golden GPA 5. That means getting an A+ in every single subject. That's often what's needed for the best scholarships, for priority access to the top universities.
And we know exactly why this GPA 5, especially the golden version, becomes this ultimate currency. It's seen as the non-negotiable entry ticket to the most prestigious places, BUET, Dhaka University, the medical colleges.
Places that promise quality and opportunity.
Right. These are institutions seen as offering not just quality, but also, relative affordability compared to many private options. There's a quote in the research that just captures the sheer weight of this for students. Students from a well-known government school described the SSC, that single gateway test, as, and I quote, the most important part of life.
Wow.
And the necessary ticket to security and a happy life. I mean, they're not being dramatic, are they?
Yeah.
That one exam score feels like it carries the entire burden of their future social standing, their economic prospects.
And when a single number holds that much power, the emotional toll, well, it can become devastatingly real. The research includes this incredibly powerful and very sad anecdote shared by a parent. It was about the recent suicide of one of their daughter's friends, and the parent directly linked this tragedy to the relentless, unbearable pressure to get that golden A+ slam.
It's just chilling. When we talk about data power, we often think abstractly, spreadsheets, policy decisions.
Right, systems level.
But this is where that data becomes an intense, deeply personal, and ultimately destructive experience. It literally broke a young person.
It did. And this terrible instance brings us right back to the systemic function of this intense focus. Celebrating the few who achieve that GPA 5, holding them up, it actually serves a purpose for the system itself, perhaps unintentionally, perhaps not.
That's so.
It becomes a convenient, very public way to sort of legitimize an education system that might otherwise be seen as underperforming by focusing all the energy, all the public conversation on these high scores.
On the winners.
Exactly, on the winners. The system effectively deflects attention away from broader, possibly more difficult questions about the day-to-day quality of teaching in most classrooms, or the systemic lack of resources. The whole conversation shifts to who scored well, not how well the average student is actually being educated.
Okay, so if the system, maybe inadvertently, deflects attention from quality issues, what does that mean for where students actually go to try and get the education they need?
Well, it means the testing culture fuels something else entirely.
The shadow system.
Precisely. This massive parallel system of private tutoring and coaching centers.
And the research suggests this isn't just a small side thing. The numbers are kind of staggering, aren't they?
They really are. Tutoring isn't just common in Bangladesh. It's deeply, deeply embedded in the culture. The paper suggests the proportion of students using some form of tutoring might be the highest compared to other Asia-Pacific countries studied. And in some schools, particularly the high-performing ones that everyone wants to get into, the researchers found that almost all students attend tutoring. It's just expected.
And this is where the real cost, financial and maybe moral, hits families so hard, right?
Right.
The system ends up making them pay multiple times for something that ideally should be covered in school.
Yes, that's a key point.
There's this one anecdote in the research that just captures the sheer injustice of it perfectly. It's from a senior NGO officer, clearly frustrated, who felt forced to pay for the same education 3 separate times.
3 times! Think about that.
Okay, break it down. What were the 3 payments?
Okay, so first, the regular school tuition fee, standard enough.
Right.
Second, an additional fee for after-school coaching sessions, run by the very same teacher who was supposed to be teaching that subject effectively during the normal school day.
The same teacher.
The same teacher. And then third, because even that wasn't always enough, a completely separate private coach hired externally to try and patch up the shortcomings of the first 2 attempts.
That's it.
And the most revealing part of his story, the part that really shows the pressure, he said he felt bound to enroll his kids in that extra school coaching, not because he necessarily thought it was great, but because he feared a different kind of treatment mechanism if his children didn't participate.
So subtle pressure. Or maybe not so subtle.
It feels like leverage, doesn't it? The school system, or at least parts of it, potentially weaponizing that affective anxiety we talked about. parents' anxiety to ensure participation in its own paid after-hours offerings.
Wow.
And this financial burden, the research argues, isn't really about parental choice. It's presented as choice, maybe, but it's driven by systemic failures.
What are the root causes they point to?
Well, it's a familiar list, unfortunately. Insufficient public investment leading to perceived weaknesses in the mainstream system, not enough fully qualified teachers for the demand, huge syllabuses crammed into short times, and this incredibly competitive, exam-obsessed culture we've been discussing.
And the inequality aspect.
Crucially, this whole tutoring structure is inherently discriminatory. It's only accessible to families who can afford the extra fees. So this high-stakes data regime, this GPA chase, it doesn't level the playing field. It just amplifies existing inequalities. It makes the gap wider.
Okay, this feels quite heavy. But here's where maybe we can start to see a way forward, especially for us as educators. Despite this dominant culture of anxiety, the research also found evidence of a strong countercurrent, an alternative affect, they call it.
Yes, a resistance almost.
A challenge to the status quo coming from within the system, from the students themselves. And maybe that's the seed of hope we need to nurture.
Absolutely.
For instance, they found students who are already looking beyond the grades, students who are actively prioritizing actual learning, developing real skills over just chasing that GPA 5.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. There's this great example of a student wanting to be a web designer, maybe a game developer. And this student explicitly denied that degrees or test results were the most important thing anymore. They argued that, in today's economy, practical skill is what really matters. They could see past the GPA fixation.
That's quite insightful. And this self-awareness, it seems, also extends to how they view their own study habits within the current system.
Right. They know the learning isn't really sticking.
Exactly. Students openly confessed that a lot of their studying was just about cramming information overnight. Why? Simply to overflow the content onto the exam paper the next day.
Just get it out.
Just get it out. And then they admitted they just forget about it almost immediately after the test is over. They are literally calling out the pointlessness of rote memorization solely for exam performance.
And that awareness, that frustration, it led to something really interesting when the researchers prompted them, didn't it? About assessment itself.
It did. Some students, when asked, didn't just complain. They expressed a desire for something different. Not necessarily abolishing exams altogether, but maybe a description of their learning journey rather than just a single grade or result.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it? It shows they felt the grade is not everything. They admitted they were just accustomed with the circumstances of the CGPA system, kind of stuck in it, but they didn't necessarily believe it was the best way to show what they knew or could do.
And that finding feels crucial for anyone listening who's in a classroom. These students sound ready for a change. They see the limitations themselves.
The potential is definitely there. The researchers suggest that the proposed new curriculum, if it's implemented properly and with the right support, actually holds significant promise. It could potentially reduce the reliance on external tutoring by shifting the focus, moving away from just high-stakes exams and back towards quality, engaging learning inside the regular classroom, providing that richer, more descriptive assessment that some students were asking for. The idea is to rebuild confidence in the school system itself so tutoring feels less necessary.
So if we try and connect all these threads back to the bigger picture, the research basically highlights this core conflict, right? You have this intense, affective intensity, this cloud of anxiety generated by the high-stakes tests. And this whole system trops up a kind of meritocratic idea, the best and brightest rise based on scores.
The myth of meritocracy, some might say.
Right. But this logic, the research argues, often serves to hide those deeper issues. The systemic underinvestment, the profound inequalities. The focus on test results becomes a huge distraction from the fundamental need for better quality, properly resourced public education for everyone.
Precisely. So for you, listening as a teacher or a school leader in Bangladesh, the takeaway is perhaps understanding that this pervasive culture of anxiety around exams, around GPA, is actually one of your biggest competitors.
Competing with real learning.
Exactly. Tackling that tutoring and cramming culture means actively proving day in and day out that the teaching and learning happening inside your classroom walls is high quality, engaging, and ultimately more valuable for the student's future than rote memorization after school hours.
The research reminds us that this anxiety isn't just individual, it's that collective condition. So to change the learning outcomes, maybe we first need to intentionally work on changing that emotional condition in our schools and classrooms.
Yes, creating an environment where perhaps rich descriptions of learning progress are valued alongside grades, where practical skills like web design, like critical thinking are explicitly celebrated, maybe even more than just the final numerical GPA.
Build resilience through a different focus.
Build confidence in the process, not just the result.
Okay, let's leave our listeners with a final thought to chew on. The source mentions, almost hopefully, that recent political shifts in Bangladesh might just open a small window, an opportunity for genuine educational reform.
A potential moment for change.
So the question for you, as an educational leader trying to make a difference, is this. How can we, collectively, seize this potential moment? How can we actively work to shift that collective condition away from suffocating anxiety about scores and instead foster an educative, effective atmospheric environment, one that genuinely prioritizes deep understanding, applicable skills, and critical thinking? How do we build back that fundamental confidence in our school system, lesson by lesson?
Something to really consider as you plan for your students this week.